Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. You are locked into the Iowa Everywhere Network. My name is Chad Leistikow, a longtime sports writer and columnist for the Des Moines Register. I cover the Iowa Hawkeyes, and I'm thrilled to be coming to you from the Channel Seed Studios to help bring you a new podcast with my competitor on the Hawkeyes beat. But first and foremost, a good friend, Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Scott, I don't know about you. I did not sleep that well last night because I was so amped for our pilot episode today. Welcome, my friend, and I would love for you to tell folks about the background of the Legends and Listeners title and what we're going to be doing here.
Well, Chad, it's great to be on with you in the Legends and Listeners podcast, and I'm excited to join the Iowa Everywhere Network because I think this is a growing phenomenon in the landscape and kind of filling a vacuum of sorts that I think people really would like to hear on a weekly basis, not only Iowa, but Iowa State and some of the other topics around the state. So Legends and Listeners, well, as we know, it's a title that's gotten all kinds of laughs over the years from Legends and Leaders back when the Big Ten's highbrow divisional play, which actually wasn't that bad, Chad. I mean, when other than the name, competitive equality was great. But, we started to play with it a little bit when we had a Big Ten podcast back on The Athletic a few years ago, and Legends and Listeners kind of joking around. But now we've decided to apply it here to the Iowa Everywhere app and online. And I think it's a phenomenal, easy to remember podcast name, and I'm thrilled to be working with you, Chad, here at The Athletic, but also at Iowa Everywhere.
Absolutely. Legends and Listeners will be brought to you each week by Heartland Flags and Gifts, which provides free shipping anywhere in the U.S., also delivers new products constantly, and has you covered with nearly every team, every sport, and every flag. Now is the perfect time to get your tailgating flags and gear for game days. I was checking out their website today, Scott, and they really do have everything. I even saw a James Madison flag for those of you who may be fans of the Dukes or our nation's fourth president. Visit our friends at Heartland Flags and Gifts online at heartlandflags.com or in store at 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. And if you support them, that will help us bring you this podcast each and every week. And that is the plan, Scott. We are going to be coming to all of you once a week during the football season, naturally, because we both cover the Hawkeyes. The conversation will center around Iowa, but we'll also delve into the Big Ten Conference. And our goal, Scott, we kind of discussed this, what the format would be, kind of hit 4 or 5 topics each show, with one of those sort of being our main course, so to speak, something we can dive into at great length. So before we get to today's entree, Scott, let's order a drink, grab an appetizer. Iowa football would be well short of a satisfying menu this season without Cade McNamara. And it appears, we don't know 100% for sure, but it appears based on what Kirk Ferentz told us Saturday at the Kids' Day scrimmage that the Hawkeyes dodged a major injury bullet with their transfer quarterback.
Yeah, I thought as soon as I saw him go down, I know you did too, that it was like he kind of got up and walked back and pulled himself from the game or the scrimmage. And I went, oh no, here we go. It's not like we haven't had enough to write about this year, going all the way back to Brian's contract and the Orange Crush and lack of invasion to now the gambling and everything else. And then the one piece that was the kind of the hope for everybody for Iowa related to go down and then left the field, was out for probably close 45 minutes to an hour, was in the training area. And I'm like, oh no. So I don't know about you. I already wrote a story that's basically insert, yeah, he tore his ACL. He's gone for the season, but luckily got to spike that, which was I was thrilled about. It's probably the first and only time I've ever been thrilled to spike a story I've already written. And then here we go. It's more in the day-to-day range. But Chad, what were your thoughts when you saw the season go down in a cloud of rubber filament.
Well put. Yeah, I mean, to me, and I know you're the same way, Scott. I take pretty detailed notes even during these things. I know it's just a scrimmage, just a practice. You can't read too much into it, but pretty much after that moment happened, it was like nothing else in the practice really mattered. It was just like this season is going down the tubes pretty quick. If it's going to be Deacon Hill, and that's no offense to Deacon Hill, he's just not even close to the level that Cade McNamara appears to be at. And so I absolutely was feeling the same thing. It was just sort of, as a sports writer, it's like you don't want, it's like what was the year that, Tom Brady, like, for example, got hurt in the first game of a season one year. It's like, oh, man, this season's over or whatever. Now, I don't think Deacon Hill was going to be Matt Castle, but, it's just like, exactly. I mean, you want to have something for, uplifting for fans to look forward to. And it seemed like McNamara, his numbers were kind of hit or miss, but I felt like his performance in the Kids Day scrimmage kind of validated what kind of the talk was, that, here's a highly skilled quarterback. Now we'll get to the offense a little later, Scott, but I was impressed with some of the deep shots he took, and I thought he was pretty aggressive with some of his throws. I know that's, probably just practice or whatever, but, he fit some nice balls in there to Caleb Brown. It was a 20-yard on 3rd and 8. And then, of course, the 2 deep balls to Seth Anderson and Deontay Vines were really impressive. I mean, that just wasn't even possible last year.
They would have been overthrows, or, unfortunately, I don't really want to get into who it was and all of that. But I mean, I frankly, what I saw was a much more accurate quarterback, able to place the ball not only in the spot where it's least likely to be intercepted, but also complete and have receivers do something with it. He threw 3 interceptions, which at first everybody should be like alarmed, like, oh no, no, it wasn't anything like that at all. I mean, one was a 50-50 ball that between Caleb Brown and Jamari Harris, I think. No, or was it? Yeah, Jamari, I think it was. I'm getting some of them mixed up. There were a lot of interceptions. But and Jamari came down with it, and it was like a play or two after Jamari got hit with a PI. So in some ways, you just say, hey, that's great defense, and Iowa has a very, very good defense. We know that. So completing passes at all in rhythm or routine against Iowa's defense is impressive. There was another legitimate interception, and then there was one that, the way the ball bounces, bounced off Luke Lachey's hands. He didn't quite have a handle on it, and right into, I think it was Deshaun Lee.
That was TJ Hall.
TJ Hall. Yeah, and Lee had the other one. I'm sorry, I'm getting them all mixed up, but because there were a lot, and Deshaun Lee had 2 interceptions and looked really good, I thought. So, but overall, I was impressed by the accuracy in what we saw from Cade McNamara, and that is the most important part statistically, of this offense, is to get above 60% completion percentage. He got it to 64 2 years ago. I think, to me, he showed that he's capable of doing that.
I was encouraged by that. It seems like all the talk is really positive around Cade, and, the Deacon Hill, the backup, who is the backup now because Joe Labus has been hurt. Certainly, he's been getting all the 2 reps. He'll probably be getting all the 1 reps this week, regardless of how healthy Cade McNamara is. Labus is supposed to return, I think, maybe this week from practice. That was kind of the hope, or from an injury he had since July, but he's way behind. So, Hill would be your guy if McNamara can't go for any reason against Utah State, but it sounded like nothing serious. Obviously, we'll keep you updated if it is, but again, like we said, sigh of relief for Hawkeye fans everywhere. The other big issue, kind of out of media day more so, Scott, was, of course, the gambling situation surrounding, the Iowa program, the Iowa State program. I thought the most notable part of the day was that Noah Shannon spoke to the media. This was not something he had to do. Coaches did not make him do it. They asked him if he wanted to do it, and he said, yeah, I will do it. And he came out and spoke. I thought he was really impressive. Noah becomes, I believe, unless I'm missing something, the first athlete at either Iowa or Iowa State who had been flagged in the sports gambling investigation to talk to the media since everything broke in May. He said, he doesn't want this to define him. And I thought Noah showed outstanding maturity, the kind we would expect from the sixth-year senior defensive tackle. What were your thoughts on kind of how the day was handled, not only by him, but Kirk Ferentz?
It's an interesting topic, of course. I mean, this is the first time Kirk has talked since fall camp and really since the arrests took place. And I would say I would be more concerned with what's going on at Iowa State. I think there are more prominent names that are already there. Iowa's are a little less, they're not here except for a few. But I think they've handled it completely differently. And I guess going to your point about Noah Shannon, he's always been a stand-up guy. He's always been someone who I think is people respect. And I think he displayed that considerably the other day. There doesn't seem to be, and according to him, no concern of a legal perspective for him. I don't know that that's the case because it's apparent that Kirk Ferentz doesn't know that's the case. Because when we were in Indianapolis, we didn't think that there were anybody betting on or against Iowa, and that turned out to be the completely wrong. Aaron Blum has been accused, charged with that offense, and then you have former players. I think Arlen Bruce was probably the most significant that have been in this situation. So, it remains to be seen. Now, I would say that, there are some concerns about a couple of potential starters, including Noah Shannon. But overall, it's more of an NCAA concern. And I think now that you've seen some charges really come out, that maybe this is what the NCAA needs to go forward in the other cases. I'm only speculating in this, but overall, I thought Noah handled himself very well, and I'm not so sure that I feel the same way about Kirk. I think Kirk is either not well informed or a little bit too much in the dark to really form some of the opinions maybe he shared on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of had the funny line of, I'm a senior citizen, I can say whatever the hell I want. Yeah, so that was kind of it was amusing, but also, yeah, I don't know what we can really take from face value on that. I mean, basically, like you said, he said, he didn't think anyone was betting on his team, and then you find out, yeah, Aaron Blum, allegedly did, Jack Johnson allegedly did, Arlen Bruce allegedly did. So this is not, that's not a good look, and I think it has to be. I'm sure he's pissed, right, that an offensive player for his son, was betting unders on the Hawkeyes, and and his and I'm not saying there was any correlation. I know he was banged up last year, but his production did really tail off last year. So it just has to irk those guys. So I'm sure that's part of Ferentz kind of speaking out a little bit out of frustration, maybe that this is going on. But I think hopefully, if you're a Hawkeye fan, you just don't get any more bad news in terms of lineups. I think it's fair to assume Shannon's probably going to miss some time. We'll find out for sure, but it's he would have had to bet a really low amount and not on football to stay, avoid suspension. And if there are other players, then I think you have to mentally prepare for up to a half season without some of these guys. So we'll get into some of the depth on the roster maybe a little bit later, Scott. But this is kind of breaking news. Hawkeyes are number 25 in the AP poll that just came out a few minutes ago. So they do crack the top 25. I think they'll have a little 25 next to their name, right, during that first game. I think they use the AP for that.
Yeah, they do. And then the next one, as you know, since you're the new voter for this state, you'll be you'd have to wait until after Labor Day night, that first week. So they don't really revote after week 0. It's after the first one. So yeah, Iowa's going to be ranked and they deserve it. I mean, to win 8 games last year with the offense as rough as it was, and certainly we will go into it, but to have an elite level defense, because frankly, that was an elite level defense. I mean, you're playing 2 playoff teams, and you're playing some pretty good offenses as well. And to be able to do what you're able to do, I thought spoke volumes about the defense. But, it's a reworked offense. There's a lot still there that needs to be redone, but overall, I think that 25 is fair. I was a little bit, I don't know, Wisconsin to me is kind of been pushed back to the top in the West, and I'm kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it, because redoing their offense and playing that style of football is foreign to people in Madison. So, we've seen a lot of really great G5 coaches, PJ Fleck, Scott Frost, some others, come up and do great, do and work in the Big Ten. And some of, Fleck's been pretty good, and Frost was the biggest flop in Big Ten history. And then I think you look at now with, what is Luke Fickell going to do? And that's that with Phil Longo, somebody who's never really worked with before, with an air raid, in a style and a climate that I'm a little color me skeptical, Chad, on that one. So, but you vote. Where did you vote, Iowa?
I voted Iowa 22, and I did vote Wisconsin 19. Kind of how I approached the poll was kind of who deserved to be there, I felt like. And I felt like just, like, for example, I think Ohio State's going to win the East, for example. But I did vote Michigan ahead of Ohio State just because they've got the upper hand. They got the better roster. I still think I would give Ohio State the slight edge just based on I don't know if Michigan can do it 3 years in a row. So that – but it's again, I mean, once the games start, the criteria changes completely. It's just like, who does look the best, who looks like the better teams out there. So I picked Iowa to win the West. I think, folks that have seen that know that. But as far as I felt like, reputation of the program, I mean, pedigree of the head coach, I do feel like Wisconsin's probably the slight favorite, and they are by odds makers. So Michigan ends up 2, Ohio State 3, Penn State 7, and it looks like Wisconsin is 19 in the preseason poll, and then Iowa's the 5th Big Ten team at 25. So there you have it. Scott, let's shift into the main course, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's our central topic of today's show, and it's going to be the state of the Iowa offense, which changed completely back on December 1st when Cade McNamara announced his commitment to the program. That's been, 9.5 months now? And we're now 19 days away from the season opener against Utah State. I know you and I will surely be monitoring, the drive for 325 as it pertains to Brian Ferentz's contract. But I thought it might be fun to kind of go through each position group, what we've learned from interviews at Media Day, what we saw on Saturday. And for me, as much as we know about Iowa, that it cannot afford to be without Cade McNamara, it starts up front. This is the number one issue for this team, in my opinion, to not only score those 25 points per game, but actually become an offense that can truly play complementary football like they continue to talk about. I mean, it's just his – I don't know what you would call it, but it's the opposite of complementary football when you have the number one defense and the second-to-last offense. So I guess let's start with the O-line, Scott. I mean, from what I've seen, I'm optimistic. I think every position left to right should be better than it was a year ago. But I still, after what I saw Saturday, I'm still concerned about this position group. I'm skeptical that they can make a big jump, as Kirk Ferentz has kind of talked about.
I'm probably less skeptical than you are on this, but I don't know that they can be good. I think they will be better. I think they could be decent. I think they could be productive, but I'm not sure they could be good. Now, we in Iowa tend to always seem to look back at some sort of past to we're like Nostradamus when it comes to figuring out different things, like, well, what happened back then is going to propel this to now. And I guess if there is a comparison that I've looked at, Chad, it was 07 to 08. And I think there are parallels, but we're talking people, and people aren't exactly math when it comes to this. And that is, in 07, they allowed 46 sacks. Jake Christensen completed about 50% of his passes. They had a good running back in Albert Young, but just was an injured, depleted, young, inexperienced offensive line that couldn't do anything. They went 6-6. Their defense wasn't as good as last year's Iowa defense. So that really, to me, and then the next year, Sean Green returns after a year from doing deliveries from McGregor furniture and going to Kirkwood Community College. Comes back, runs for a school record 1,850 yards, 20 touchdowns, wins the Doak Walker, unanimous first-team All-American. The offensive line started off so-so, and in fact, the Kids' Day scrimmage that year was the biggest bludgeoning I've ever witnessed in my life. The defense absolutely murdered him. If Sean Green gained 5 yards total, I'd been surprised because I've never seen that before. And since then, obviously. But you also remember who is on their defense, and it makes sense. However, I look at this unit, and I think that there are some comparisons that are apt. I did like the left side of the line the other day. I thought they competed. I thought they opened some holes. I watched some of the pass rushing with, how did they I was really concerned with how they were going to handle Graves and Y.A. Black, because I think they are NFL guys. And I liked what I saw. I liked the way that they moved. I liked the way they come up. Now, that's not to say that they didn't get in there, because they did. That's a good unit. However, I am concerned a little bit about the right side of the line. Jennings Dunker looks like a modern day Goliath, but the slingshot went right around him a few times. So, I think, is that going to be his best position? Can he handle speed rushers? Because he'll have to find that out very, very quickly, probably as soon as week 2 against Iowa State. If not, he's going to have to, as kick inside the guard. Which may not be his worst position, but I'm anxious to see how that kind of works out. Whether it's we get Rusty Feth maybe being the right guard and Dejon Parker at right tackle, or Nick Young or Jennings. Maybe that was just a bad day and he missed a couple of blocks and he understands what he's doing too. But overall, I'm optimistic that they'll be decent, and that's maybe all they might need for a little while, because I am very optimistic about their running game.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, to me, right tackle is my number one concern, because Dejon Parker was not available for practice. It just seems like health has just not been kind to him thus far, and he's kind of one of the two guys they've got earmarked for that spot, the other being Jennings Dunker. Do they have to, I don't know if panic is the right word, but just sort of go back to the most reliable option they have there, which is Nick DeYoung. And, frankly, just right tackle has been such a huge problem the last 2 years. You just can't have that again to have a glaring weak spot off the edge. But I like your 2007 comparison. That's one, I've kind of looked at as well. I mean, you think a great example on that line would be like Brian Bulaga, kind of a rotational left guard that year. You could maybe you could stretch and think of him as a Connor Colby, okay, like a year younger. And then, the next year he becomes, a starting left tackle and frankly played at a very high level. And then the following year was at a very high level and got drafted in the first round. So, that's the type of jump Kirk Ferentz wants to see from the Connor Colbys of the world, the Mason Richmonds of the world, even. I mean, who is a 2-year starter, but was he told me he was playing hurt all last year. He got hurt in August and was out 4 to 6 months with knee surgery. So Iowa just was patching it together last year. They just had guys improve from 07 to 08. I mean, you look at Callaway, you look at Brueggemann kind of and solidified things at center and allowed Eubanks to be more of a rotational guy that in 08. So it just seemed like the depth was better in 08. And I think that's where George Barnett was kind of stressing to me the other day, is he likes that they have competition in the room. I mean, you've got Connor Colby, a 2-year starter, who's competing for the starting job against Rusty Feth right now, left guard. And then at the right guard spot, you got Bo Stevens and Nick DeYoung. I mean, that's a young guy and a veteran. They feel great about Logan Jones. I still want to see it to believe it. And then, right tackle we talked about. So I guess we'll see. I believe Kirk Ferentz, right? Like, as an offensive line guy, if he's bullish, I'm happy to be cautiously bullish, I guess.
Yeah, and there are areas where you just kind of go, maybe you roll your eyes when a coach brings up, but with Kirk, when he talks offensive line, you kind of have to, he's earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to this. And I think, what I see is Do I see Mason Richmond equals Brian Bulaga? Not quite, but I think he's capable and quality. And, going back to, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when you look at, when they started, Boone Myers and Ike Butker and Cole Croston. And I think Richmond's in that category, maybe even a little bit more talented. I saw a lot that I liked of Logan Jones the other day. I thought, okay, to me, he's turned the page. They've been talking him up for a while, but he showed a lot in a pass pro to me that made me go, okay, and he's so quick. And I know that was his big issue last year was he was thinking a lot, and it made sense. And he kept hearing about how Tyler Linderbaum was so quick off the ball, and that's what he was trying to do. And that's why they snap always screwed up. But now he's been able to do that. And of course he squats 700 pounds. So that's incredible. But when you look at, the other thing is, they were all pretty much sophomores. I mean, all but 13 starts up front last year were by underclassmen. And Jack Plum was one of them, and Nick DeYoung. I mean, Nick DeYoung came as a non-scholarship guy. Jack Plum, just didn't quite develop into that key starter that you needed at late in his career. So all these guys are building, and you see it from time to time. That Kirk says it all the time. You can't microwave these guys. And now that they are juniors and they are 2-year starters, and then you got Bo Stevens, who started 10 games, who probably at best should have been a rotational guy, and probably more than likely shouldn't have played. Now they've got experience, and now they can go 7 or 8 or deep and feel like, okay, if somebody gets hurt or whatever, that they can rotate. That to me puts them in a pretty good spot, because there were times, and the other part we forget is they played 7 out of the top 14 defenses in the country in total defense. And then the number 2 overall in practice every day. So there were 8 that they saw all the time. That's not going to be the case this year.
You are listening to the Legends and Listeners podcast with Chad Leistikow and Scott Dochterman, live from the Channel Seed Studios. I want to remind you that Circa Sports is the exclusive sports betting app of Iowa Everywhere. Circa provides sports betting the way it should be, with the highest limits, the lowest holds, and the best odds. Download the app today in the App Store or at circasports.com. Scott, I checked today, and if you want to bet Ohio State over Iowa in the Big Ten title game, which is my pick this year, you can get that at plus 800 odds. So I want to talk about, let's flip to bullish odds. The top 2 position groups of this offense, I think we would both agree on, but I'm curious if you put them in the same tier, tight end and running back. I'm really high on both these groups, because they both have star potential and depth. Do you put them in the same tier? You're on mute, man. Early podcast jitters, right?
Yeah. COVID era returns, right? Sorry about that. But I think the running back position has a little bit more depth, but I think that the tight end has legitimate NFL players. So I think when you look at Eric All and Luke Lachey, I think they could be equal in production to what the tight end position had last year, which was really good. I mean, Sam Laporta, really one of the more underrated players Iowa's ever had. And the more and more I've watched him and kind of gone back through and then realized what the offense was without him, he might have been the best tight end of this era, of the recent era. He might. I don't know why I would put Hawkinson or Fan above him. I think it's just it was unfortunate that he didn't have Amir Smith-Marset and some of the other players around him. But I really like the tight ends. I think those 2, as long as they don't consider one a specialist and keep them off the field, I think that they'll be all right. To me, we saw it on Saturday that they went heavy 12 personnel. Yeah. Almost exclusively. And if they go between 65 and 75% of their snaps with 2 tight ends, that's a winning strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super high on the running backs as well. I think Caleb Johnson, certainly a number 1. And then just the fact that you've got a veteran like Alishawn Williams and Jazzy and Patterson. I mean, I thought every time we've seen him that he shows some bursts. So yeah, it's nice to have that depth there. Because, injuries usually do occur at that position. So, as far as offensive skill position, I feel like, if that offensive line can take that step forward, they'll be able to get those maybe 4 or 5 yards on first down that were so elusive, the last several years, and make the quarterback's job easier, which gets us to quarterback, Scott. I mean, I think we kind of talked about him a little bit, but who's he going to be throwing to? 3 of the 5 scholarship guys that have college experience, to me, the ones that practiced, the other day, all looked pretty encouraging to me. I thought Deontay Vines looked the part. He's finally healthy. Seth Anderson, have heard great things about him from camp, and I was not disappointed whatsoever. And I know every fan out there is like, what about Caleb Brown? Come on, get him out there. But I thought he's behind these guys. He's learning the system, learning the offense. And what I saw out there was in the wide receiver lines, very athletic, good hands. And then that 20-yard catch to me in traffic from Cade, that showed me a lot. And it makes me feel like I think the top 4, Scott, is going to be Vines, Anderson, Regaini, and eventually Caleb Brown. That is kind of where I land. And I feel pretty encouraged about that group right now.
I do too. I'm not ready to crown him like former Iowa.
Bears reference. First Bears reference on the podcast.
There you go. Former Iowa defensive back Denny Green once said about the Bears. But no, I do think that what I saw was a capable unit and making good catches. I was probably a little bit more impressed with him than I thought I would be, especially Seth Anderson. I thought, okay, wow, this guy's legit. And then Deontay Vines seems to be taking steps forward. That's really important for that position. They need him to be there. And, Nico gets set out the rest of camp, and he'll come in and he'll be a baller, and he's got 125 catches. I went back and looked through remember the Holiday Bowl before we all came back with Holiday Bowl COVID, right before the whole thing started. But you look at the receivers on the field, Amir won the award for MVP, draft pick. Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown was tremendous.
Michael Pittman.
Yeah. Velus Jones, before he transferred to Tennessee and ended up with the Bears. Yeah. Sam Laporta, you've got some really big weapons in the pass game. And he finished tied for second in receiving yards that game a million years ago. So I think he'll be fine. I like this unit a lot. I'm not sure they have that X that they need, the tall guy. It might be Vines because he's probably the biggest, thickest, and most knowledgeable of that. But I think they can survive that, especially if the offensive line comes around, protects Cade McNamara, and they can run the football. Then they have the tight ends. So I'm not as concerned that wide receiver needs to be a weapon as much as it is just get the ball in their hands and let them do some stuff once in a while. That's where I am. But if I had Chad, if I had a biggest question mark right now after what I saw Saturday, it's probably backup quarterback, frankly. If Cade McNamara goes down.
Yep.
I was probably more encouraged after the spring game. I thought that they had a really decent opportunity there. I'm probably on the other side of the fence now after what I saw Saturday.
Yeah, same here. I think I had Deacon Hill for 3 interceptions. And, you just don't want to get to that point. He might be a fine number 2, and Labus can maybe battle him out for 2 as things go on here, but you got to keep Cade healthy. And so that, again, it circles back to what I said is the most important thing, which is that offensive line has to be decent. We've only got about 10 minutes left or so, Scott, in our timeline, but I did want to pick your brain before we finish the offensive conversation about your interview with Brian Ferentz. You got the only sit down with Brian this summer. I know you guys talked about the 25 points per game thing. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts were in terms of what you heard from him, what you've seen. Do you think that 25 points per game is going to be attainable? And how do you feel like he's kind of processing all this?
I think with Brian, and I do think probably with the entire staff, starting with Kirk and also with Brian, is they've kind of gone to a little bit of a bunker mentality. And, because it's just been so overwhelmingly negative, rightly or wrongly, but it is, that it's like, we can't win anybody over. we're just going to kind of get back to ourselves and not worry about what anybody else thinks. And we're just not going to put ourselves out there anymore. And, when I caught Brian, he was just returning from a vacation, and we had a really interesting in-depth conversation comparable to some that you've had there. When we talked about the 25 points per game, he goes, I hope people don't think that that's my idea. I don't think it's a good idea. And, it seems pretty obvious that there was a lot of discussion, some that he would go into on the record, and some maybe he would prefer not to talk about it a different way. But, some of the issues that I think make sense is, first of all, I understand from Gary Barta's point of view why you would do that. The offense has stunk the last 2 years, no question, especially last year. And fans have been very vocal in wanting Brian moved. And he could do that, but you've also got, a statue type coach, and you go over his head for his staff on his son. That is an unwinnable situation. So he wanted to try to extract something to show people that, hey, I'm doing something here. But the way it was done was stupid, frankly, and clumsy. And it makes Iowa a laughingstock. And it's something that's going to get brought up all the time this fall, not only in Iowa, but everywhere. When the first time they punt, hey, Iowa, you're going to, get that 25, the drive for 325. We talked about graphics at the Athletic, we could put up for this. How sad is that? It's something that absolutely I think they attain. I mean, unless Cade McNamara goes down and two linemen go down with him, I think it's something that they, because his first 4 years, they averaged 29 points a game. And the thing that I try to bring up, not to try to shield Brian, but just try to explain this, is his first quarterback was Nate Stanley, who had 68 touchdowns over 3 seasons, the most for any quarterback in Iowa history over 3 seasons. In the last 3 years, they've had a total of 28. Players matter, and it's not all on him. Now, we could question his play calling in certain situations, and I will, and I have, and you will, and you have. But I think that overall, schematically, there needs to be adjustments. I think they realize that, and they have made some differences. I know I talked to John Budmeyer, I know you did too, to kind of go through some of those. But overall, I think he's bullish on his team. He's trying to be a little bit more guarded. But he's in a tough spot. And frankly, writing that story, I just went, here we go, because I just know what the reaction is from Iowa fans. They do not want to read anything other than, Brian Ferentz has been executed on the courthouse lawn.
Oh man. Good way to finish there. Yeah. I mean, I just feel the same way. I feel like, everyone's kind of banding together. I think they know it's going to be better, and they're just going to let it play out. Again, they can't lose the quarterback. So that was the other thing that raced through my mind about 1:17 p.m. on Saturday was, oh boy, 25 points a game is not going to be easy if Cade McNamara is out. We've got a few minutes left. Let's hit a couple of these out the door here. I don't know if you want to call them desserts or, maybe a little cocktail or something, but conference realignment, we can't ignore that in our first podcast together. You've been working so hard on that at the Athletic. I've written a few columns on at the Register on that. We could hit any number of angles here. We've got time for probably one. So in terms of what are you looking at as the most important issue in Big Ten expansion right now as we head towards next season with the 18-team league involving USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington?
I think schedule is going to matter, how they redo it. I don't think it's really only going to need some tweaks, because I expect that the way the Big Ten is going to do it, at least initially, is have all 4 of those teams play each other, and they probably should from a logistical perspective, because then if you've got 5 games, I mean, think about this. If you're traveling and you're from USC or Washington and you've got 5 road games, if you're playing 2 road games on the West Coast, that only limits you to 3. Maybe you can have 1 before the start of school. I think scheduling logistics from a football perspective, I think is going to be really impactful early. I don't think much is going to change. Like Iowa may not, I'm just throwing it out there, may not play at USC. Maybe they'll play at Oregon or Washington instead, that type of thing.
Sure.
And I think that's probably first. how they handle championship game is going to be really major. I'm glad that there's an expanded playoff, because if there wasn't, then this would be topic 1, 2, and 3, because you're going to get ties, and maybe you'll have opportunities for team 3 and 4 that are in that category. Maybe there's a 3-way tie at 8-1 or 7-2, and you'll be able to kind of mess around with that. But I think overall, this is going to be, who's going to play in the championship game is going to matter. And then finally for Iowa, it elevated the middle class. These are, when we looked at Maryland and Rutgers, I think everybody went, so, at least in football, right, and in all sports pretty much, especially with Rutgers. So now you're looking at Washington and Oregon and USC in particular, those 3, and then also UCLA. And you're thinking, okay, this isn't gonna be easy. It's gonna elevate the entire league, which helps Iowa. And I don't care, if you're USC and you're coming to Iowa, we know what that steel cage is like. We've seen it with Ohio State. Iowa's the only team to beat every team in the East during the East-West era. But you're going to also have to go there, and that's not going to be easy. So if Iowa continues to recruit at the level it has for the last 5 or 6 years and develop its offense and maintain the consistency on defense, it'll be fine. It'll lose some of those games, but it'll win them too. But, those are kind of the 3 takeaways immediately for me. Chad, what do you think? Because I know you have a lot of perspective on this too.
Yeah, I personally, it doesn't affect me as a student athlete, traveling, all that stuff. I personally like it just from the competitiveness aspect. I've said this a few times on other podcasts and our own, but I'd rather watch Iowa, Oregon at Autzen Stadium than Iowa, Indiana at Bloomington. You're just going to get more of those types of games instead of Iowa Rutgers. You're still going to have Iowa Rutgers here and there, but you're also going to have Iowa Washington, and you're going to have Ohio State Washington. You're going to have fewer Ohio State Rutgers games. It's just, I think overall it's just a lot more fun. I think it fits great with the new TV contract, and I frankly love the idea as a consumer to have that big noon game. We're talking Eastern time, 3:30 game. 7 o'clock game, and then your 10:30 Eastern time game, which is 9:30 for us after we're done with our Hawkeye game, or we're covering that late one, maybe one of those days. But you can turn on some Big Ten after dark, and heck, maybe you're watching a Minnesota at UCLA game or something like that. It's just fun. It's just fun as a Big Ten fan. You don't really need to tune into other conferences, honestly. So I like it. I like it personally, and I also, I know we're going long here, but first of all, the conference championship thing, the conference championships are going to be mostly meaningless unless you just give that automatic bye to the winner. So give them a top 4 seed, and you don't get a top 4 seed if you don't, something like that. But I feel like the harder schedule is going to help ultimately Iowa's playoff case if they get to that 10, 11, 12 range in the future, because what was the criticism in 2015? Well, they didn't play anybody.
Yeah.
They're not that's never going to be an issue anymore, right? It shouldn't be. I can't imagine it would be unless they just got the easiest draw possible. But to me, the opportunity is going to be there every year to play yourself into the playoff is what I'm saying.
Yeah, if Iowa goes even 12-0 and loses in the championship game, it's not getting to the playoff this year because of the Big Ten West. And unfortunately, that's reality. And perception is reality. But when you throw those 4 teams in there in a true cycle here, I think this is going to be, something really unique. And, and Fox ponying up, $60+ million a year to add Washington and Oregon means that there will be more Friday night games for sure, 100%, and Saturday after dark. Now, there won't be as many Saturday after darks. It'll basically be all those those 4 teams playing home games on Saturday nights, and then maybe a sprinkle in a game or 2 during the season. But Friday night, count on it. There's going to be, and now I don't know if it'll be at Kinnick, but we've seen, Friday night in Maryland and those. Yeah. So that's going to be in every week. It's not going to be like twice a year thing.
Indiana, Minnesota, I would think all the West Coast teams would be on the table for that.
Yeah, absolutely. They are. Absolutely, they are. So. No, I agree with you. And one last word, I know we are running long, but I'm sorry, is just the other sports. Basketball is going to be interesting to see how this develops. I do think, though, adding the other two helps logistically, not hurts it, because it allows those other teams, like let's say they stick with a 20-game schedule. I think it would make sense for the Big Ten to just say, you know what, you 4 teams play each other twice, home and home. Mm-hmm. Just make it easier for them, and it makes it easier for everybody else. You can still be in the same conference. You can still play them, but don't be wedded to this. Everybody plays everybody the same amount of times. It's not feasible right now when you're a national conference with 18 teams.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, let's skip our last topic for this week because I guarantee we can come back to it next week. We're going to talk about the new era of Beth Getz as interim AD, but we're potentially going to hear from her later this week. So I have a feeling we can talk about that on next week's show on Iowa Everywhere. Thanks for joining us for the Legends and Listeners podcast, everyone. Scott, why don't you give us a quick rundown of anything you're working on at The Athletic, and I'll do the same for the Register, and we'll let everyone go.
Yeah, I wrote today about Caleb Johnson and, kind of the Greek god physique that he has, but his aspirations of being one of the best running backs Iowa's ever had, and he's got that potential. So I've got that, a few other feature stories I'm working on, along with a Big Ten money story. So that's kind of what's in the near term for me. And how about you, Chad, at the Register?
Yeah, something I was excited to do the other day, and I know you did as well, was talk to John Budmeyer. I mean, here's a name in the program that has been an influence, no question about it, for more than 12 months, probably closer to 18 now. And, kind of to hear what his influence has been with the program and what he thinks of Brian Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz, whatnot. So I'm kind of working on that. We'll have our usual Hawk Central podcast on Wednesday. So kind of nothing changes with our day jobs. I just want to stress that between myself at the Register and Scott at the Athletic, but we're just thankful for this opportunity to be on the Iowa Everywhere Network, and appreciate you, my friend, wanting to do this with me. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm very excited, Chad, to go through this season with you and do this. And then, even in the off season, because there's so many topics there. And hopefully we get some good stuff to write about and talk about, and hopefully there aren't any existential crises that seem to be springing up here from time to time.
Yeah, we could use it. Let's just go a little while without some of those. Yeah, that'd be nice. All right, folks, thanks again. We will have another episode dialed up for you next week as fall camp comes to a close at Iowa, and we will be, I guess it's just 17 days from now, we'll be in our regular game week rotation on the Iowa Everywhere Network. I think our show is going to be on Thursday, either late morning, early afternoon, that type of thing. So stay tuned for that. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register saying so long, and talk to you next week.